As you guys may have seen, there's a small change in the title. I'm not gonna explain why. There was a discussion in the Slack group. If you Google it, you might also see why. But we changed it to local issues. Yeah, so Lars already told you about that Picnic is actually a tech company. I joined about a year ago. I worked for the first half year on the Runner app in React Native. And from about a half year ago, I joined the store team, and I'm now working on the iOS app, which is the customer-facing app, also the only app the customer is using and the only way you can order. And this is how the app looks like. You might have seen it already a bit in Lars' slide as well, but I want to point out it's like it's a super nice grocery app. You can order your groceries, you can order recipes, you can order meal boxes. And it's like it's covering the whole customer journey because if the groceries will be delivered, you can also watch the vehicle on the map. But we have a problem, and I promise I will not only talk about problems today, but we'll start with the problem. And that is that we have two platforms, and the problem is not that we have an Android app as well. It's more that we have two platforms. It is, they are 5 years old already. The code base is 5 years old. And as you can see, there's a lot of history, a lot of people joining. Oh, that's one too fast. A lot of people joining, a lot of people leaving. So there's quite some different people that have worked on this project. Also not really a problem. But we have two countries where we deliver in. So we have the Netherlands, but we're also live in Germany. That meant that we had to translate at some point 1,000 strings to another language. But the problem is that we don't really have any conventions for or we had no conventions for strings in our apps. So basically the keys that you use in the app, they were also, there was no convention within the team, so within the iOS and the Android team, but also definitely between the teams there was not really much of communication. Which causes a lot of workflow problems because the keys are inconsistent, which is not nice because also if you start building a new feature, it is nice if you know how to define the keys. But also adding a new language like German at some point was a big problem because we didn't have any shared localization between iOS and Android, which meant that we had to translate it twice, the entire app. This was done using multiple copywriters worked on this, but copywriting is in some way a little bit subjective. Like there's multiple opinions about what the best copy would be in an app. So there were a lot of differences between the iOS and Android app, and we're still quite often fixing those differences. Okay, I'm now going to take you back to the moment where we started developing the Picnic app. Actually, this was when Lars started. 5 years ago, his first work day at Picnic, he made this super simple app. He made it only in storyboard. There was no code written yet, and it was all good until somebody walked in and said, "Okay, in the future, we might actually have a different language in the app." And all of a sudden, he had to start writing code. So he put some code for the view controller and made the button and the label localizable to support multiple languages. And everything was good until we found out that we had a special mission at Picnic. And that is the mission was to make people that are visually impaired or blind also able to do grocery shopping for the first time themselves. Because as you can imagine, like people that are blind, they can go to the supermarket, but they always need somebody to pick their groceries for them. So we started localizing making the app accessible from end to end. But that meant that we had to add a lot of additional fields. I don't know, are there many people, or can you raise your hand if you have an app that is, or work on an app that is accessible? Okay, that's quite some people. That's nice. Good to see. But it's a lot of extra fields you have to add. So the button can have a hint. Button can have a label, accessibility label, and maybe it can have a value. So with our current situation, this was not really working because we have to, actually it is implemented like this now, so we have everywhere multiple fields for our buttons and stuff. But we wanted to improve this situation, right? So we're looking for a solution where we can manage our localization in a better way. So to have a single source of truth where we can both have our iOS and Android strings centralized, but also more importantly, have all the accessibility strings and the translation all together in one place. Then we want the solution, or we would like a solution that is copywriter friendly. We would like a solution that's developer friendly and one that is controlled and versioned. Okay, I started talking too soon about this slide. So localization and accessibility should be in one place. And it should be consistent copy across platforms. Copywriter friendly means it should be easy for a copywriter to change and add new copy without needing help from the developer every time. And there should be a clear overview. Like having two different files for your Dutch and for German is not really easy, because if you want to add a new language, then you have to you cannot easily see what the Dutch translation is for a specific thing you're looking for in German. So it would be nice to have a view where you can easily see the different languages under each other, the different translations. And then we would like a tool to be developer friendly. So we want to get rid of this problem where we don't know how to define the keys for our localization, and also don't want to be in a situation where we have new people joining every now and then, and they have their own kind of personal convention. So we want to have a predictable way to define the keys. And also adding localization to your app is not really fun. It's a lot of copy and paste. It's easy to make mistakes, and we need to fully automate the process so new strings can be easily added. And it would even be nicer if we would have type completion, type safety, and code completion, so we don't make mistakes in adding keys. And last but not least, it would be nice if the solution we pick would be extendable to fit exactly our needs. And then it would be nice to have a strict review process. So adding copy is something that should be easy, but it should still be the case that every copy is reviewed, because it's easy to make a mistake, and you want your copywriter to actually double check it before you merge the new feature in. And also, if it happens that at some point there's a problem, we've had a problem, for example, where in our rating flow in the app, there was copy slightly different than before. And at some point there was, the people thought that it might be because the copy changed. And it was for us hard to find when this actually happened. So it should be easy to see when changes to the copy are actually made. And last point is that if you adopt a certain structure for your copy, it would be super nice if we can enforce some checks on it to make sure that everyone that's adding them, whether it's a developer, whether it's a copywriter, sees if the way they added it is the correct way, if it's in the correct structure. Okay, so we looked at several existing solutions, like OneSky, Localize, and PoEditor. And well, they in some way have a single source of truth, as in there is a way where you can define all your keys centrally. But the one problem we wanted to solve, and that they didn't solve, was that we want to have like all properties like the translation and all accessibility fields grouped for a specific component. And you can add them separately, but it's still messy. Well, all tools are, of course, copywriter friendly. They have a super nice interface. And they are developer friendly to a certain extent. They allow you to import or easily update the copy. But if you want to extend them, they are all paid tools. So if you want to extend them, then you probably will pay a lot to let it happen. And versioning was also fine. So then this was already 3 years ago, by the way, when Lars started this project. Initially in Ruby, we now made it again in JavaScript. But we started with Localicious. And how we tackled the problems I mentioned before is that for the single source of truth, we use a YAML structured file, and it's one single file that has a nested structure. And for us, we use a convention where we have a module first, then a screen, then a component, and then a position to make sure that we always have unique items and that everyone does the same. And as you can see, so this defines the exact element we're talking about. And then there's another section that has an accessibility mapping for all the accessibility values and their translations, and a separate translation field for the translations. And this file renders to either a localizable strings or a strings file. Then it's also quite copywriter friendly. There is room for improvement. I will also mention it later on. But what is nice is that all the translations are at least shown under each other. So it's really easy if you add a new language, you can just see how it's translated in English and in Dutch. And then it's developer friendly because we can generate these structures. So it's a nested structs for every layer. So you first have the checkout module, then it has an overview screen, it has a checkout button that has a title, and that title covers all the data that we want to put on this specific button. So let's say we have extensions like this, which allow as the input to have the data which contains the translation and accessibility fields and set them directly. Then we can make the piece of code I was showing earlier a little bit easier. We can remove all the lines, or not all of them, but we can replace them with at least the accessibility and the translation lines. We can replace them with just 2 lines to set all the values for the specific component, which I think is super convenient. Okay, then to make it controlled and versioned, we're using Git to keep track of the changes. It's a really easy solution, but it's working, and also copywriters, it's apparently super easy to explain to them, and they also like using it a lot. And it allows you to, especially if you, or for example, if you use GitHub, you can always create a pull request and make copywriters check it. And the last thing is that since we have a YAML structure, we can easily use something like JSON schema validation, which allows us to put certain rules to the schema and enforce them to make sure that every time something is committed to the repository, that we know that it's actually according to our schema that we defined before. So to have a consistent structure and to enforce conventions. Okay, so how does our workflow now look like? So what I do if I create a new feature, I create a feature branch and work on that branch until I see that I need to create to add some new copy. Then I go first to our repository. We have a separate repository for just the localization, or actually it's an internationalization repository. I create the pull request where I add the new keys. I assign the copywriters, and the copywriters will then check whether the translations are correct, and if not, they might change it and in the end merge it. And with Localicious, I can just simply pull the latest changes from the repository and put it in the app. So what if you want to integrate a Localicious in the app? Then there are 2 things that are really necessary. So first thing is we have the localicity file, which is the file that contains all the translations in this structure I mentioned before. And then there is a Localicious config, which exactly defines where to get the localizations from. So it can be either, this is an example with a repository, it can also be just a path to a file, and which languages to get the output in. So currently it's just English, but you can add German and you'll get a German file as well. And which platforms to output, because you can have an XML file for Android and a strings file for iOS. So there's some future work that we would like to do. First thing is create a web UI, because I think that all the other localization tools have a pretty nice UI, and in our case, our copywriters, even though they like it, they have to use a YAML file. Which is for now, it works perfectly for us, but you can imagine that if we have a lot of languages, then at some point this file can become pretty big. And the next thing is it's also would be super nice if we can, especially if we implement screens in React Native, already pre-render how certain copy will be shown on the website. Next thing that would be nice is to have, or that we would work on, is statistics and diagnostics. So we wanted to show to people how complete is the language you're adding. Because if you add a new language, it of course goes step by step. And in the beginning, you'd have only a small percentage, but you want to know how much you still have to do to get the translation ready for the release. Furthermore, we would like to have more insights on duplications between translations, and to get a similarity score for iOS and Android. So currently we have still a lot of keys that are separate for iOS and Android, and in most cases that is totally fine, because you have just places where the copy should look different. But if they are different and there is a similarity, and there can be a similarity found between iOS and Android, then it's nice if we can flag them so it's easy to review whether it's really meant to be different, or if it can actually be the same but it's slightly different at the moment. Okay, going back to the previous example. We implemented Localicious and all was good until our QA engineer came in and he wanted to automate the testing of our app. So we started adding accessibility identifier, but now we have two lines again to set all the fields, which is not what we wanted in the first place. So we went back to the drawing board and looked at our structure for the Localicity, and we saw something, and that is that every component in our app is defined using this tree, and it's also true that there can only be one child node per level. So this is actually an exact key that can be used as the identifier for the app. So this button will can have this identifier, basically. That's what I wanted to say, which allows it allows an easy process for the automation, because if we at some point convert everything to use these Localicious extensions, then it means that every element that we need to access through Appium is automatically already identified by this accessibility identifier. So maybe I forgot to explain, but if you use Appium, I think I forgot to explain. If you use Appium, then the only way that Appium can, during runtime, access one of your elements on the screen is to have an accessibility identifier set to your component. Okay, and now I want to show a quick video about how our automation looks like at the moment.
User is logged in. User taps Login button. User is on login screen. User specifies valid checkout NL user credentials. User taps Submit Login button. User closes Message Center if it is available. App loads Storefront tab screen. User selects Cart tab. App displays basket content. User taps delivery slot selector header. App displays delivery slots list. User scrolls delivery slots list to the end. User selects last visible delivery slot. User selects search tab. App displays search field. User searches for milk. App displays search suggestions. User selects first search suggestion. App displays search results. User adds first search result product to basket. User selects cart tab. App displays basket content. User taps checkout start button. App displays checkout complete button. User taps checkout complete button. App displays checkout confirmation screen and push permissions prompt for iOS. User exits older confirmation screen. App loads storefront tab screen.
All right, that's it. So this was just our full checkout flow and ordering flow automated. This is also the end of the presentation. I hope that Localicious will at some point also make your life easier by allowing you to easily create accessible elements and allow test automation. That's it. Yes. Oh.
So or specifically for the demo or just?
Yeah, we edited it for the
use
demo actually, but too bad it came from my laptop. But yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so without voice, it's actually much faster as well. It's only 30 seconds for the whole flow. What?
Yeah, great tool. I think it has great potential. What I wonder is like the structs you showed shortly.
Yeah.
Is that something you need to create like manually, or do you have something created to make that automatically?
No, that's automatically generated using templates. Yeah.
And is that also like available into like your build process? Did you implement it in a build phase or something like that?
Yeah. So not yet. For currently, it is the moment that we sync new. So the idea is that if you use this tool, you will not touch your localized files anymore yourself. So there is just a specific moment where you pick yourself where you want to sync your new or your updated localizations from the localization repository, and this will generate for you both the code part and the localized strings. Yeah. So I don't see much, like given that they don't, it's not something, it's different than R.Swift, for example, does it. But that's because every time you add an image or you add a string, you want it to be regenerated. And now we picked a specific moment that we want to update the localization because it's updated in a repository. But yeah, it could be added. It's just a single command line script. So if you see any need for running it every build, then feel free to add it.
And last question I have, like, is there a way to know which strings are not yet implemented in the app? So, like that you easily know, like I still need to implement those localized.
Oh, you mean to see if they are unused, for example?
Yeah, and that could be because you forgot.
Yeah, so I think Xcode in general is not really good in unused properties. Maybe if you use app code, I saw on the website last time that they allow this now. But no, other than that, no. We recently went over all our strings in the app, and I also found a lot that I couldn't find. I wanted to look where it was actually used, and then it wasn't used in the app at all. So there's not really, I think still with this, there's not really a good way to find it. So if you have any suggestions on how to implement it, would be nice.
I have a few ideas, but let's do that after the...
Okay.
Yeah.
You say that the structs are generated.
Yes.
But how do you do that then in timing? Because then you must have all the copy, or at least all the identifiers.
At the runtime, you mean? What do you?
No, when you're developing a feature,
yeah.
most of the time you don't have all the strings up front that you exactly know which strings you will need.
Yeah.
So at what,
So that-
what
so-
moments you define those?
Yeah, so what I usually do is I go through the strings I have to add. Then I create a feature branch on the localization repository. So I try to do it all at once. And then you can just target, using the localicious config, you can target this feature branch and get the strings in.
Hi. I had the same question as Marius, but the thing is, two questions. How do you handle obsolete strings was the thing that Antoine asked, and we had a huge problem with design changes so often that we used OneSky. It was just filled for 30% with obsolete strings. So
Yeah.
it's a really hard problem. You basically have to use gen strings from Xcode to figure out which strings you don't use anymore.
Yeah, so we don't really have a nice solution for this. I know we use this tool. I've got the name, but it's a kind of this huge static analysis tool, and you have to run it once, and then you I think it's periphery. That is supposed to find dead code in your app, and if you create the structs, of course, then there will be dead parts in the structs or unused parts. But even with periphery, whatever, there was still a lot of dead code that I didn't find. So it's not really promising to me.
And the second question,
Not
is it
yeah.
open source? Or is it, you didn't
Well,
mention
good
that?
question, good question. It is open source.
But it's on your laptop. Okay.
It's
Very nice.
this is the link.
Yeah, it looks very
It is not.
promising.
We're still working on it, and mostly because we did the re-implementation in JavaScript. We're still finalizing it a bit, but maybe if you already give it a star or follow it, it will get better. Yeah, that's a promise.
Quick question about the copy-friendly part of it. I'm the only imposter in this room because I'm not really a designer. I'm more product designer, and the copywriting is something I'm currently struggling with. And the main part, I think, for an important part is to have like the context of the translation or the copy you need to do. And instead of having the rendering, it's probably better to have what you need to translate in context to see the screen before to do the copy instead of doing it after. And it's just something that
Yeah. So I think for us, this is, for us, if we design a new feature, then the screen goes to the copywriter first. So then the copywriter has full context about what the screen looks like. And then there is only some copy that has to be filled in. So I think in that case, it's already kind of solved for us. But I'm not sure if it solves it for you.
More questions? Yeah.
Yeah, two questions. On iOS, you can also make string dictionaries for pluralization and stuff like that. Do you have any support for that?
Actually, not yet.
Okay.
On Android we do, but on iOS not yet. It's also on the to-do list, I guess.
So my second question is actually about Android. On Android, you have the R, which is already type safe, but do you also generate structs and stuff for Android?
No, we don't do it yet. But we also, like our iOS app is fully accessible. So that is why it was for iOS already a problem. I think this is also an opportunity to maybe also make the Android app more accessible. And then it makes sense to maybe generate something to also be able to set all the fields at the same time. But for now, we don't have it at least, the generation part.
Okay, because for our app, I don't think do you still hear me through? Yeah. For our app, we do something kind of similar, but simpler. But we have like a lot of shared code in Kotlin native. So we're actually looking for a solution that we can write Kotlin code with strings that works both for iOS and Android.
Okay. Yeah, so we do code generation in a really lazy, easy way using Mustache templates. And no, I'm not going to show it now, but you can go to the repository at some point because it's not merged yet. But yeah, no, but the code generation part not. And we have templates for code generation, but even the Swift one, it's really simple. So I think if you know what you want to achieve, then just looking at how the other templates look like, I think it's super easy to edit for Kotlin as well.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, nice talk. I had one question. Do you also support specific language codes like Belgium? It has like NL with the separator BE.
That's a good question, but in the end, the keys that we use in the local recipe are just things that we put there ourselves. So we put NL and DE, but of course, if you want to make it more fancy for us, we didn't need it yet. But in the end, you can just it's just a string, so you can put whatever you want, and it will work.
Cool, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
So I have a question. Great article, actually. Why didn't you use any ready solution? Because there are so many solutions with web interface and everything. You could like connect Swift GAN for it, and that's it.
Yeah.
So why did you start everything from scratch?
That's a valid question. So I think first answer is that this project originally started 3 years ago in Ruby, and back then there wasn't really a nice tool that also allowed you to fetch the localization directly into your app instead of so you had to go to the page and download it manually. And I think the other solution, and that's mainly why we now like it so much, is that we can get everything together that belongs to one component. So both test automation, identifier, and accessibility and translation. And so far as I know, with existing tools, you can only have like single mapping between two keys, and it means that you have to group them together, maybe in your iOS code or whatever. Yeah. So that's the most important reason.
Thank you. Last question.
No last question.
Well, thank you, Lucas.